Hi guys, so today I want to react to what is the 51st U.S. state gonna be. Before we even start, I think it's only fair we give credits to the original creator, which was General Knowledge. His channel will be in the description, as will be his video. So, let's start.
States. America is a country consisting of 50 states, a federal district, 5 major self-governing territories, and various possessions. But the way the territory is organized might change soon. Territories might become states.
Oh yeah, and by the way, I think the the next U.S. state would probably be Puerto Rico, just because it's has such a large population. It has I think a higher population than more than like half of the U.S. states, which I think is really cool. And not only that, but it has unique culture, which I guess all of the territories do, but it also has a pretty sizable area. Like a couple of these that he's gonna mention aren't that big, but Puerto Rico is bigger than I think Rhode Island, Delaware, and Vermont, and maybe New Hampshire. Anyways, let's continue.
And possessions might become territories. So in this video, I want to take a look at what might be the 51st U.S. state. A quick mention to let you know that this video is sponsored by World of Warships. Today, the US has 50 states, but this number has changed a lot since its creation. 13 colonies revolted against the British, and one by one, these
So I don't know exactly why West Virginia isn't shaded in, considering West Virginia was part of Virginia at the time. Like, my guess would be that West Virginia wasn't a state, and he's shading in only the states now. But if that's true, then why is Vermont shaded in, as it was a 14th state, and at the time it was a disputed zone between New York and New Hampshire. And the same thing goes for Maine. It was owned by Massachusetts, and it wasn't a state at the time. But anyways, let's continue.
initial 13 ratified the 1787 Constitution, thus being admitted one by one into the Union. Delaware was technically the first, followed by the other 12 very soon after. As time went by, more and more territories became states and joined as well.
Like he said, Delaware was the first, technically the first state, which is kind of sad because we don't really hear about Delaware that often. In fact, if I had to rank the states by like prominent, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but like if we had to rank them by importance, Delaware would probably be at the very bottom, or at least one of the bottom spots. It's just so small and has such a tiny population. It's not really talked about that often.
Usually the progression was made east to west, with the exception of the West Coast, California, Oregon, Nevada, and Washington, which joined before some of the Midwest.
I think that's pretty cool. I don't know, it's kind of weird that they did that, but I think they made California a state so that they could balance it with because California wanted to be a free state, and they had to balance it with a slave state. I think that was Texas. I could be wrong in that, but I think that's why California was made a state.
Last continental state to join was Arizona in 1912, and Alaska and Hawaii were the final ones, joining in 1959. Hawaii were the final ones, joining in 1959.
I think it's weird that Arizona was the last state, because it is one of the western states, but you'd think that it'd be like California, Oregon, or Washington. I think that's pretty weird, but
59, with the American flag changing every time more states were admitted, adding one more star.
I think like for Tennessee and Kentucky, when they were added, they added a stripe too. So I think for every state that they added one other stripe. But I think that it got too crowded, so they eventually changed it back to 13 stripes. Again, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how it was.
Per state. And since 1959,
I think these look pretty cool. The Grand Union Jack, it's obvious why they got rid of that. But I think these are some cool ones. The stars and the circles. This one just looks like a frown face.
61
But I understand why they didn't use these for anything. Because, well, I think they wanted continuity. It'd be weird if they had like in this shape and then it had like a circle or uh, a star or something. It'd be
20
weird.
years. No other states have joined the Union, but some could. Even if we set aside all the possessions, which one could argue are too small to be a state, the US still have their federal district, 5 major self-governing territories, and any of these, plus some other specific ones, could make a case for their admittance to the Union. Before that, and very quickly, like I mentioned, today's video is sponsored by World of Warships. I know sometimes sponsored World of Games, the war, and they bring as well with, and during the register 7 premium cars and strike for 7 days, and even some special ships. The US Shizuki occupy the 51st video.
Sorry.
What are these possible new states that might occupy the 51st slot and maybe even more? First, the federal district. That is Washington, D.C.
Before he gets really into this, I don't think Washington, D.C. will become a state. Its population is respectable, so I think that's not really the problem. I think it has like 600,000, which I think is more than Wyoming and maybe more than Vermont. But it's just so small, I just don't think it'd be right for it to make it a state. Like, it'd just be so crowded on a map, too. I'm not saying, like, if there were really good reasons to make it a state, then I think they would go for it, but the map is already pretty crowded. Obviously, it's not a big reason, but anyways. I think they don't have any representation, though. I think they're, like, put under the direct rule of Congress or something. But I think that there are other ways of going about that than making it a state.
Formerly the District of Columbia, and this is the capital of the United States. The US Constitution provided for a federal district under the exclusive jurisdiction of the US Congress, and the district is therefore not a part of any US state. The states of Maryland and Virginia each donated land to form the federal district. Washington had an estimated population of 702,000 people as of July 2018, making it the 20th most populous city in the United States.
That's interesting. Even though it's the capital of the US, there are much more populated cities. Just wanted to put that out there.
It's also more populous just as a city than the state of Vermont or the state of Wyoming.
Yeah, Wyoming is really small in terms of population. I think there are like 30 cities that have a higher population. It just has like not even 600,000 yet. That's even though it's like the 10th biggest state by area.
However, despite all these people, they don't really have representation. Going against the US's ideals in their revolt against the British of no taxation without representation.
Yeah, so I can kind of see both sides of the argument. On the one hand, I think they were put under the jurisdiction of Congress, D.C., and then people migrated to it. So that's a little different from the concept of the American Revolution, where they lived there and then they had no taxation, where they had no representation and parliament. Having said that, it's still really weird because there are like 700,000 people who have no representation. That's definitely not good, and I think the main reason why they don't have representation anymore right now is because Congress hasn't really gotten to updating that. And they have a lot more stuff to do, but I feel like this is still really important since it's 700,000 people we're talking about.
DC has one delegate to the House of Representatives, but he doesn't get to vote. Plus,
what? Then why? I'm wondering why they even like have a delegate if she can't do anything, but okay.
Plus, they don't have a Senate representative. Statehood would change this and allow the people who live there to have representation. It would also allow full control of local authorities over the territory, since currently the final word of authority belongs to Congress itself. But some people claim this wouldn't be a good idea. The US, like many other federal states, has a capital federal district. This would eliminate that, or they would have to create new laws that allowed the federal district to be inside its own state. Brazil has Brasilia, Germany has Berlin, and both aren't states but exist within the federal system with their own specific status. If Washington, D.C. became independent,
I think that they should, Congress should just update it so that they do have representation, but they don't become a state. I think that'd definitely be the best idea.
it would rank 49th by population, 51st by area, 1st by GDP.
What? Wait, I thought before he said that it was a higher population than Vermont. Maybe I was wrong. Yeah, 51st by area by a long shot. I think like Washington D.C. is only like 50 miles or something. But it does have some interesting parts. Wait, I'll show you why.
Per capita,
I mean,
first by
it has the first by GDP per capita and first medium income. So I think that's pretty cool. And it's 34th by total GDP. That's insane. It beats out 16 other states. Yeah.
median household income and 34 by total GDP. In 2016, the mayor called for a vote and a proposed state constitution was released. The vote happened, and from those who voted, 86% wanted statehood.
Wow, that's insane. That's a huge majority of how many people want. I think Puerto Rico had like a higher. They wanted it even more, but again, I don't think it's a good idea to make them a state. I think they should just have representation.
Flag could stay the same, but it is arguable what they would call the new state. I guess Colombia would be the best name. Some claim New Colombia, Potomac after the river, or Douglas. Then we have the 5 territories. These are American Samoa, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Let's start with the one most people argue should achieve statehood.
Yeah, and I think the reason why this is most likely going to be the 51st state is because it has both a very high population, with like I think 1 or 2 million people, which is more than like half of the U.S. states, and a very decent size area-wise. I think it's like bigger than like a couple of states, so I think that's really why I think it'd be a state.
Puerto Rico. It's located around 1,600 kilometers off the coast of Florida to the south, being a part of the Caribbean. Puerto Rico has a very interesting situation. It is the world's oldest colony.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. I'm not sure if that's even correct, but I'm just going to assume that's correct.
It was first colonized by the Spanish in 1493, and since it remains as an unincorporated.
Okay, if it's 1493, then I can believe that, because when I think of colony, and I think of Europe, and one of Europe's main colonies were in Africa, and I don't think the scramble for Africa hadn't happened yet, so I guess that makes sense.
Territory of the U.S. since 1898, it's still technically.
And it's part of it since 1898 because of the Spanish-American War, where basically this U.S. freed Cuba from Spain, but they kind of took Spain, and they also got Guam, Hawaii, and the Philippines. But they got to keep oh, and Puerto Rico. I'm not sure if I said that, but they got to keep Puerto Rico, Guam, and Hawaii, but Cuba and the Philippines became independent and became their own country.
Considered a colony now of the Americans. Despite this, Puerto Ricans have been U.S. citizens since 1917 and can move freely between the island and the rest of the U.S. Like D.C., they have a non-voting representative in the House.
But again, I don't know why they would even have a representative if they were not going to do anything. But I guess let's continue.
But no senators. But only some residents pay federal income tax. The territory's total population is approximately 3.4 million, more than 21 U.S. states.
Okay, it's 3.4 million, not 1 or 2 million. More than 21 current states. That's a pretty big deal, and that definitely, I think it definitely deserves to be a state for that.
so it would become the 29th most populous should it join the Union. In 2012, they voted in a referendum, and the majority of people wanted to become a state. In 2017, they voted again, and statehood won with 97%.
Yeah, I think having it become a state would be a good idea, and there's another reason I forgot to mention this. But when it becomes a state, it's permanently part of the U.S. You know, you can't really leave the U.S. once you're a state, and you can. This is pretty obvious if you think about the Civil War, because many people want to leave in the South. So had you been allowed to leave as a state, then there wouldn't really be a civil war. They would have just been able to, you know, exit the Union, but it's illegal. So that means that Puerto Rico would permanently become part of the U.S. As a colony, I think it has the right to leave the Union. So
Although only 23% of people voted. But there is also another option, full-on independence. For instance, the
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. They right now they have the ability to leave the U.S.
UN Special Committee on Decolonization has often referred to Puerto Rico as a nation in its reports because internationally, the people of Puerto Rico are often considered to be a Caribbean nation with their own national identity.
I wonder if that is also true for like the other colonies, like French Guiana and the Falkland Islands. Like they're owned by European countries, but I wonder if they're considered like their own nations, even though they really aren't.
The US itself seems somewhat divided as to whether they want Puerto Rico as a state or not. Various presidents throughout history publicly supported it, like Ford, Reagan, Bush Sr., amongst others. Next,
I don't know why it hasn't become a state yet. I wish he talked about that, but let's continue.
we have Guam. Guam is an organized territory of the United States in Micronesia.
Yeah, and this was seized during the Spanish-American War.
In the western Pacific Ocean. It's the westernmost point and territory of the United States. The inhabitants of Guam are called Guamanians, and they are American citizens by birth, reaching in 2016 around 163,000 people. Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan, while in the service of Spain, was the first European to visit the island in 1521, and it was also then colonized by Spain in 1668. During the Spanish-American War, the United States captured Guam in 1898, and after the peace treaty, Spain permanently ceded it to the US. It has some movements which advocate US statehood, or union with the state of Hawaii, or union.
I don't know why it's union with the state of Hawaii. It doesn't seem to be nearby, but maybe there's something I don't understand.
With the Northern Mariana Islands as a single territory or even independence. Apparently, the local government has began a UN-supported program to educate its people on what the different types of options they have, free association, statehood, independence, etc., so that they can eventually hold a vote for it.
I think that they should either become independent or they should become a state. I think because right now they don't have representation since they're a territory. So either they should get representation and fully join the U.S. as a state, or they should get independence and have representation.
2016 poll conducted by the University of Guam showed a majority supporting statehood. An unofficial but frequently used territorial motto is "Where America's Day Begins," since it's close to the international dateline. So who knows, maybe it'll be where America's new statehood expansion begins as well.
I don't have a problem with Guam becoming a state. I think it has a decent population. It'd have the lowest if it became a state, but 160,000 is still really good. I think the only problem would probably be its size. It's pretty small. I think it's like only 200 miles, but it's not nearly as bad as I think DC. So
then there's an interesting case, Chicago. To be
yeah, this isn't I'm not going to really take this one seriously. I really don't see any way that Chicago is going to become independent.
To be honest, this one seems like kind of a joke, and the very few people who advocate for it seem to be politically motivated other than any other type of ideal. They're upset that the people who live in Chicago have, according to them, too much power over what goes on in the rest of the entire state.
I don't know exactly what that means, but
Essentially, this would take the city of Chicago out of the state of Illinois and become its own independent state.
yeah, there's no really reason that it would become a state. It's already a city, so there's like they have representation, so it's not like DC. They have a good population, but again, like Washington DC, they have a very small area. I'm not sure how big Chicago is, but it's a city, so that yeah.
A bill was put forward at the state house to vote for this, but it obviously got almost no support and failed. The new state would either be called Chicago or New Illinois, but let's be real here, it's never going to happen. Another territory.
Okay, I'll wrap it up for this video. I'll do part 2 maybe another day, but that's pretty much it. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing for more content, and leave a comment about what I should do for my next video. See you next time.